Hello, everybody. This is Charlie Smith with the Mobil Delvac team. I'm the host today, and I've got two of my good friends, Paul Cigala and George Arrants, with me today, two widely recognized industry experts here, and we're excited to do this webinar for y'all. Today, we're going to be talking about upskilling the workforce, preparing your technicians for the long haul. So like I said a minute ago, I've got George and Paul with me. As a quick introduction, George works for ASE, is the Vice President of the ASE Education Foundation, also past chair at the TMC SuperTech. Paul Cigala, one of my colleagues, he is a CVL application engineer for our lubricants organization and is currently a vice chair of the TMC S3 study group. So we're really excited to have these guys today here, providing a lot of insights and solutions for how you can help work to improve fleet operations, as well as really helping to tackle some of the challenges that we're seeing around technicians. What are we going to cover today? So we're going to look at a closer look at the technician shortage. And when I say technician shortage, George is really going to help us frame that up a little bit better, and what the problem that we're trying to solve, as well as some solutions where industry can work with education. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what George has to say there. Then we're going to pass it along to Paul. He's going to talk more on the fleet side. What are some preventive maintenance practices that fleets can do today to help start freeing up technician time, and as well as improving fleet operations? Then we'll have a quick look at a case study of a medium fleet, what they're doing today to help retain technicians, really driving culture to upskill their workforce. And then lastly, we'll have a quick wrap up to talk about some of the things that we're covering today. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to George.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Charlie. I'm glad to be part of this group. We talk about technician shortage all the time. Next slide. And the question really is there a shortage of applicants, or there a shortage of qualified applicants? Through a survey we did at TMC a few years ago, we determined that nearly 90% of TMC members said they had a shortage of qualified applicants. That is completely different than a shortage of applicants. For one reason or another, these individuals are interested in coming to work for your organization or fleet, but they don't meet the criteria. And that's where we need to fix those that are non-qualified to qualified. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but let's look at some numbers. Charlie, next slide. So let's look at the labor force by generation. I know this says 2010 to 2020, and there has been some changes over the last 10 years, but at that time, we had four groups: the traditionalists, the greatest generation, us baby boomers, the gray hairs and no hairs. We had Gen X, which you folks just mad at the world and always have been, and the Gen Ys, and you guys asked why about everything, and it should have been WHY. But then since then, we've had the millennials and the Gen Zs, and some people have put the Ys and the millennials together, but they're truly different. Ys question everything, millennials just may be needed. But look at the makeup of the workforce. And what I'm trying to show here is all of these different folks are in your organization, and they all think and communicate differently. But then over on the other slide, it looks at the labor shortage. And there's a large group of us, the baby boomers, that are going to be retiring at an alarming rate. And with us and the traditionalists, a massive amount of knowledge and experience are going to leave with us. And with that, we're trying to capture some of that experience and drive this next generation of technicians into the workforce. Charlie, next slide. In a survey that I did myself, I personally reached out to schools around the country. Bottom line is we have nearly 11,000 diesel students graduating annually at the post-secondary level. What do I mean by that? Community college, private for-profits, private nonprofits. These are not high school programs. These are adult programs. These are not even including the medium heavy duty truck students that are completing high school programs that want to work in our industry. Also, we have some automotive students that are taking automotive because diesel's not offered in their community or their community college, and they're taking the next best thing, automotive, but they want to work on trucks. So this number actually can be larger. Next slide. One of our friends, a company called SP2, they do safety and environmental training for schools across the country. Now, mind you, they're not in every school, but they're in many auto, collision, and truck programs. And right before the pandemic in 2019, 2020, it shows you the number of post-secondary and high school users of theirs. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it says 166,000 students taking their training. That doesn't sound like a shortage to me. If you look over during the pandemic for 2020, 2021, it dropped to 159,000. But the real drop was in the collision. We are losing collision programs across the country. There's low enrollment, and those programs are closing up. We're trying to stop the bleeding there. But even during the pandemic, if you really look at the numbers, auto had an uptick of about 1.8%, and medium heavy duty truck had a slight uptick of about 2.1%. So those people that said that this generation isn't interested in working with their hands, these numbers say that's not correct. And what we need to do is we need to work with our schools and your local offices to form partnerships to drive the local workforce or local students into your places of business for long haul technicians. Next slide. Is there a technician shortage or is there an education gap? And in no way am I blaming education for this. What I'm saying here is if you're not involved in your local tech school and you're not telling them what you need at an entry-level technician, you are part of the problem. Many of you listening to this are both personal and professional taxpayers in your community. And if you're not involved in your local program to tell them what's important to you, then they're going to continue to spend their money the way they've always have because they don't know that there's changes in the workforce without your input. Industry needs to be involved in these local programs. This is a pool of entry-level employees. Many of your employees and you yourself may drive by a school every day on your way to work, not realizing there's a pool of people potentially could work for your organization. And somebody from your organization should serve on the school's local advisory committee or get involved with the local program, either through a guest speaker or a career fair. Next slide. Other industries are also recruiting the students that we have in these programs. We are blessed to have all of these programs around the country that are teaching either auto or diesel techs. Other industries aren't as blessed as us. And what they're figuring out is what are the entry-level skills that they need in their organization. And they're going to our programs and recruiting our kids. And if our wages are lower than theirs, those kids are going to go there. If there's additional expenses for tools and other things, these other organizations may not have that expense, and those opportunities look better to these students. We've done all this work to get these young people interested in our industry, only for somebody to come steal our talent. If you're involved in your local programs and they know who you are, we can stop that bleeding also. Next slide. When you're recruiting, you need to recruit at the beginning of the year and not at the end of the year. Most people show up at a career fair in March or April at the end of the school year, and you're just another table at a career fair giving away useless trinkets. Your company needs to be involved in the program when the students start in the fall and be involved either through guest speakers or have them tour your facility or other activities that engage your brand with those students. So that when there is a career fair, you may have even already hired some of these kids, but they know who you are and they're coming to your table. Once again, being part of the advisory committee is a great way to get into these programs and have a better understanding of not only what's being taught, but get to know the students who are in the programs. Next slide. Your company needs to stand out. You need to these students need to understand the opportunities like visiting your company locations and receiving hands-on learning from experienced techs. That's either through work-based learning, internships, or registered apprenticeships. If you have online training or training that you offer in your organization, offer it up to the students and the instructors in your local schools. That's driving your brand and the equipment that you're servicing. And these individuals can get training ahead of time. And it's an opportunity for you to get somebody who's already immersed in your organization's training before their first day on the job. Also, shadowing. Shadowing is an opportunity for students to learn more about your organization at your place of business and you to learn more about them. Create an internship, apprenticeship, or work-based learning. We have found that those students that are doing internships or work-based learning while they're in school are more likely to stay with us long-term career. And those that do not, a lot of those we lose in the first 2 years. You need to provide real-world opportunities for these students, some sort of pre-graduation placement. If you have an intern or somebody working in your organization that's in school, let them know that you plan to make them a full-time employee when they're done. That's important. Then they're not going to go look for somebody else to find a job because they think when the apprenticeship or the work-based learning initiative is over, they've got to go find work somewhere else. Also, guarantee them access to additional training after they hire. And then also the biggest expense for an entry-level tech is that starter tool set. Many of the tool companies offer discounts to students, and some of them extend it a little bit to the employers of entry-level techs. Work with your organization to possibly loan a student a set of tools for the first 2 years while you're fostering a loyalty between you and that student, and then make it as part of the employment package that you would turn over the set of tools. Also, we at ASE have just launched an Adopt a School program. This is available to everybody, and it's different solutions in a box for your organization to get involved with schools in your community. Once again, it's as simple as being a guest speaker, having somebody tour your facility, serve on the advisory committee, career fair, all the way to taking an apprentice or a student in your organization. Next slide. And sometimes we don't understand the millennials. And this says, why don't millennials eat cereal? And for about a decade, there was a huge shortage in cereal sales. And the marketing folks at these cereal companies did a major campaign and push to figure out what was going on. And the simple answer was, Charlie, they didn't want to wash the bowl. Think about that. They don't think like we do, and we don't think like they do. I'm not saying it's bad either way, but we have all these generations in our workforce now, and we need to be able to communicate with all of them. Even though we were brought up at a certain time where we think this is the way it needs to be, it's not. My generation, the gray hairs and no hairs, the baby boomers, we live to work. This generation works to live, and maybe they got it right. We need to understand that there's that work-life balance that is very important to people these days. And also, more important than anything else, you spend 8 or 9 hours a day with your employees, 5 days a week minimum. You spend more time with them than anybody else in their life. You need to make sure you understand what's important to them. Make sure that they feel like they're part of the family. Charlie, next slide. This time I want to turn it over to my good friend, Paul, talking to you about fleet efficiency.
Thanks, George. Appreciate everyone's time to go through our presentation. So now we're going to look at fleet efficiency from a lubricant standpoint. Next slide. All right, so preventative maintenance approach, is very essential for small and medium fleets. According to TMC FleetNet survey, an average fleet operates about 36,000 miles between an unscheduled repair on the road. For large fleets that have resources and talent, this is something that they can handle in their day-to-day. But for small, medium fleets, this might be their only piece of equipment, and they may not have any spare equipment. So you want to look for opportunities to spend less time on maintenance and more time that can be spent on other tasks from a technician standpoint. Next slide. So let's talk about adopting a preventative maintenance approach. First, we're going to look at products, and then services, and then kind of the mentality. So the whole goal here is to increase the availability of the technicians through less repairs of the equipment, less time spent on maintenance, and then cost savings that are related to the reduction of maintenance. Next slide. So from a product standpoint, we're going to talk about the lubricants and how we can increase uptime. So choosing the right lubricant is vital. Making sure you have the proper lubricant for across from bumper to bumper on your equipment to fit your duty cycle. So we know lubricants minimize friction and wear in the engine. They cool the engine components. They seal that vital piston ring zone, and they maintain the cleanliness of the equipment. They also are designed to prevent rust and corrosion inside of the engine. Some ways that we can look at increasing operating efficiencies using lower viscosity oils, increasing fuel economy, and then looking at lubricants that last long life, that give you more uptime and availability of equipment. Next slide. So, products that are developed to reduce the maintenance tasks. EPA has continued to mandate lower greenhouse gas emissions and fuel economy starting in 2014. As these next generation engines and after treatment systems were designed, we started seeing more and more stress being put on the engine oils because there was increased temperature inside the equipment. And CJ4 oils led to the creation of CK4 and FA4 oils. And those oils are designed for longer life as well as fuel economy benefits. Next slide. Using products to reduce maintenance tasks. Grease is a perfect example. Even though it's a very low lubricant demand in a fleet, using a premium product can help increase the service intervals and can kind of start looking at lining up re-greasing intervals with oil change intervals, or adding A services and B services to maximize the uptime and less time that equipment spends in the shop. If you have a fleet of 100 trucks, can require as much as 100 hours of technician time just on re-greasing. You can cut that down by 50% using a higher quality grease, extending or safely extending the re-greasing interval to free up your technician's time. Next slide. Next, let's look at services to help increase equipment availability. Used oil analysis, perfect example. Taking a proper sample from the unit, either intermediate or at drain, having it analyzed and having the results interpreted and giving you an idea of looking at trends. So used oil analysis can help us monitor the health of the equipment by looking at excessive wear metals in there. Can also give us an idea of health of the oil and contamination, be it fuel dilution or coolant leaks inside of the engine. All of this information, when it's trended over time, can give the opportunity to safely extend oil drain intervals by 5, 10, or 15,000 miles based on a customer's duty cycle. Used oil analysis is a fantastic tool in helping us make those determinations. Next slide. So, why used oil analysis? This can help look at any kind of contaminants in there before this equipment becomes broken down on the side of the road or catastrophic failure. We'd be able to make those determinations based on what we see in there. Are we seeing coolant from EGR cooler leaks or head gasket leaks? Are we seeing fuel dilution from high idle times or fuel injector issues? those can be captured and corrected before it's a breakdown. This can increase your equipment reliability as well as availability and uptime, and reduce your maintenance costs and your waste oil generation by opportunities for extended oil drain intervals. Next slide. And then lastly, mentality. So training and mentoring of the technicians. 2019 study showed that mentoring increases employee loyalty by 77%. However, fleets may lack the resources for time or skill to help provide that information to their team. In these cases, reach out to your trusted partners, your OEMs and your oil suppliers that can bring training and extra support to the technicians. From a lubricant standpoint, it can be best practices, it can be root cause failure analysis, and then condition monitoring and understanding what information you can gather from a used oil analysis report. And if there's something in the report, where am I going to look for the problem? These are very valuable as information is flowing back into a fleet. Next slide. So let's talk about a success story with a customer that is also involved in the podcast series that George and I did, Golf Relay. Golf Relay is a company that has about 230 trucks and 700 trailers, and they employ about 11 technicians. They're not solely targeting experienced technicians. They're looking for bringing people in that are willing to learn, people in their community, people that they know, maybe have went to school with, and they're looking to bring them on and train them and then grow them long-term within their fleet. I'm going to turn it back over to George.
Thanks, Paul. These folks really did a great job. Their vice president of maintenance is a young gentleman, and they're looking for people that are like them, that think the same way, and there's a real family environment here. And hats off to the owner. Once a month, they do an activity with all the employees and their families, so everybody gets to know everybody. It's back to what I said earlier. This generation wants to feel like they're part of something. And the core group is really a great group of individuals. And Marcus, who was talking to us on our podcast, Long Haul, one of the guys is a friend of his. They played football together in high school. The gentleman is not a technician, but has the right attitude and hands-on skills, and they're growing their own through people that they know in their community. And they're leveraging supplier relationships as necessary to be partners. And that's what's important, is some of your suppliers want to be your partner and some may not. And those that want to be partners in your organization, just like at Gulf Relay, they're helping you grow your organization and retain it. And many of you on this call knows what it costs to hire and put a technician on the shop floor. But if you're growing your own and teaching your own, and they feel like they're part of the family, they're staying, because it's that life-work balance that they're looking for. Next slide. So to wrap it up, I think we're going to turn it back over to Charlie.
Yep, George, and if I can just see if I can summarize some of y'all's key insights here. George, on your side, there's an industry misperception that we don't have enough people interested in this industry, whereas you showed, in your research, talking to schools, we actually have a ton of people interested in this industry, and we need, the fleets and industry to get involved with education. And there's a ton of great insights in here on how companies can get involved today and not only with the presentation you gave, George, but also going to ASC for some quick ways on how they can get involved and make a difference. Is there anything else here that I missed or you want to add before I pass it to Paul?
Nope. Real quickly, national concern with a local solution. Get involved. And if you're not involved, you're part of the problem.
Yes, sir. Couldn't have said it better myself. And then, Paul, on your side, there's some, although lubrication might not be make that easy connection point between, freeing up technician time and more uptime for the fleet, there are some easy key ways to help with solving those problems. One, perhaps they want to look at more premium greases to align with their engine oil, and that can free up some technician time. And then on the used oil analysis side, that is a often missed easy way to avoid some catastrophic failures and really ensure that the fleet is getting the best oil drain intervals for their duty cycle. Did I capture that correctly? Is there anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Charlie, is, reach out to your suppliers. They'll be able to give you guidance on oil drain intervals, used oil analysis, making recommendations on products to help increase your uptime of your equipment and decrease the technician time in doing oil changes and services.
Yeah, that's a great add. It's also about culture, and we are here to help. If you all feel overwhelmed, I know it's a tough time right now, but we're the folks that can help y'all implement programs like this. So just lastly, before we close out here, George teed it up here. We just introduced a new podcast, The Long Call, with George and Paul. And if y'all liked what y'all heard during this webinar, there's a ton of great insights and trends here that you can learn about. And Paul and George get into some of these topics in more detail, as well as interviewing other experts around the industry from TMC, the education side of things. So I really encourage y'all to go check that out. You can find it on our website or at Apple and Spotify podcasts. So with that, that concludes our webinar. I really appreciate it.